can sit down on it, I'm on the board, okay. What did he actually do when he says, I'm on the board of you? Is there any documents showing what he actually did? Or,
I'm sorry to say, what, he was on the what?
He said it on here, in this building here, that he was, not him, I think, but another place at the Farm Bureau, he was on the board of the oversight of the whole thing. So what did he actually do?
He's on the committee.
A committee, okay.
Committee that.
Well, he was he and Carol Alvarado were the co-chairs. They made the decisions. They took their instructions, presumably from Joe Strauss. I mean, they were the ones that guided the committee. The committee was broken up, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. You look at the Republicans; these were all, with the exception of God, now I forgot his name. He went from the House to the Senate last time, but I lost the vote 7-1 or whatever it was, and he was
Dan Patrick.
no,
Van
Van
Taylor.
no, it wasn't Van.
Oh,
But I'll remember in a minute. But they guided what happened. They guided whether or not they sent, that they sent it to the district attorney. They guided what, Dan Flynn was intimately involved with whether or not I got a subpoena. I mean, why wouldn't the man subpoena me? He would have me under oath in public. He could ask me any question he wanted, anything. He could get to the bottom of it. Didn't want to hear it.
Why do you think Bill Powers still gets a check?
Why do I think he still gets
A check.
a check?
Bill Powers.
He's a tenured faculty member.
Tenure.
And because he's over his 9 or 10 years as president, when you look at how he got here, he came from Berkeley. He went through the law school. He went through what many have suggested was a very flawed process to be selected as the president. He's very tight with that Houston legal crowd, and the Houston legal community has had a chokehold on the University of Texas at Austin for 30 years. Vincent and Elkins, Baker and Botts, Harry Reasoner, the late Joe Jamail. I mean, they have had a chokehold on the university, and when you give seats to influential and powerful and rich people's kids, you're going to make a lot of friends along the way over 10 years. If you've done it hundreds, if not thousands of times, but it's very hard to dismiss a tenured faculty member for almost anything. And he had a contract that stipulated what his deal was going to be when he left.
Anthony? You had a question?
Is Texas Tech part of the UT system?
No.
No. We were testifying before the state board in 2005 or 2006. A UT professor testifying on science stood up and made the statement to the State Board of Education that any student in his class that believed in God, they were just too stupid to pass his course.
Academic freedom. They can say whatever they want. They're pretty protected in that regard.
Are there any other questions? No? Well, got one more. Go ahead.
Let me, I've got maybe 1 or 2, I guess they're kind of challenging questions. There's nobody here. I wish Dan Flynn was here. Dan is not here, right?
No.
I've known about the situation for years, and I've tried to get to the bottom of it. All I am is just a vote on East Texas boy. I live in Stanger Springs community, Ben Wheeler, and I tried calling a few folks, and I guess the closest I got to someone I thought would have the inside information was I had a one-on-one meeting with Dan Flynn, who I like, who I don't like, and I consider him a friend. And I think it was the day before they were voting on something. It might have been the impeachment. We were talking about impeachment of you. And he told me that day that he, unlike the majority of the committee, was not in favor of impeaching. His sentiments were that he wanted the regents to handle the situation. The infraction I think that we talked about was getting confidential information from the university and letting it out. You expose some student information that you.
Which was false, by the way.
Well,
No, that's one of the false accusations. It never happened. I had the information. I never disclosed it. That's what they tried to prove. It never happened. Ever.
Okay. Well, let me say first of all, that I do appreciate you coming out here, because I wondered about this for a while, and like I say, I haven't been able to get to the bottom of it. Let me ask, make a couple of questions that kind of, when I went to Dan's office, I thought the thing centered around centered around the cost of the student's education. I know that Governor Perry, wanted to put the $10,000 cap for 4 years of tuition. Let me ask you, are you in favor of that?
I'm in favor of as many multiple points of access for students to higher ed as we can have. And what Governor Perry suggested wasn't that UT Austin was going to have a $10,000 degree. He challenged our universities to find a way to offer a $10,000 degree. He was laughed at. He was ridiculed. But some of our institutions, not UT Austin, but UT Permian Basin, they've accomplished that. They met the challenge. It's remarkable. And now it's, yeah, and now it's, everybody's like going, oh yeah, well of course, $10,000 degree. Well, when Governor Perry suggested it, people scoffed. And, it was absurd. So that was one of the allegations is that the board was going to tear down the quality of the university. That we were going to tear down its prestige and turn it into a diploma mill. Once again, all created by a PR firm, Karen Hughes firm, that worked with this Texas Coalition for Excellence. It was just absolutely not true, but that was part of their game plan.
Well, I think what the concern is government, represented by Governor Perry, going to universities and saying, this is what you need to do. I know what you need to do. And then, more or less shoving it down their throat. And like you say, it made sense for some universities, but, for Texas A&M or UT Austin, I mean.
Right. But the reality of it is, as y'all probably all know, Texas has a very weak governor. We're a very weak governor state.
Right.
Governor Perry could say whatever he wanted, but it doesn't mean he could make anything happen. And the board, we can try to do things, but these things are very time intensive. They're laborious. They're complicated, and that kind of stuff just doesn't happen. The biggest levers of control we have is if we find one of our health institutions or academic institutions that needs better leadership. The difference between a mediocre president and an all-star is a game changer. Absolute transformative game changing. And that's where most of the change comes. You just have to find the right woman or the right man who has the right ideas and ability to implement reforms or change or whatever it is that we're going to do. But the idea that he was going to force us to do anything, I never heard. All he and I ever talked about was affordability, accessibility, improving the quality, and the damn debt loads are too high on our families. And that's what he cared about. And he worked really hard to improve the University of Texas at Austin. And he also deserves credit for bringing us the Dell Medical School.
Well, let me ask this. Again, one of the large points seems to be the president taking what you said, there's the dirty track of letting in certain unqualified students, favoritism type thing, political, paying off political debts, if you will. From what I've seen, we know that Bill Powers overruled his, or the admissions committee had their, determines who comes into the university for the most part. He made some exceptions. Now, my understanding, the exceptions weren't that many.
Yeah. So.
Now, tell me.
Yeah. So the Kroll report.
There weren't like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like his niece or his brother-in-law.
Well, we don't know. We don't know that. We don't know the question of that answer because none of us have seen. We haven't seen the work product. Okay, none of that could be disclosed in the report because that would be exposing what's called FERPA, which is federally protected student information. They can't release that to the public by law. So you're not going to find any of that in the report. We might know that if we were allowed to look at the backup, which I've asked for, which I've had to now file suit against the chancellor. The best way, but the numbers run potentially into the thousands that related to the back door. Hundreds didn't even go through the holistic interview process, but were admitted through the back door. People that were very unqualified. But there's also many very qualified people that came in through the back door, which is a condemnation of the top 10% law. The chancellor and I both agree on that. We don't like the top 10% law. We think it holds the university back. He and I disagree over exactly why, but we don't like that either. The best analogy I can give is the track meet, or track meet metaphor, if you will. It is, you know, your kids want to be in engineering, and they work all the way through high school to get into that engineering school. And there's going to be 5,000 students that show up for the track meet on Saturday. There's 100 spots to get into the engineering school for that year. Everybody's going to run the race. Well, what it turned out is that 5,000 people didn't run the race. Maybe 4,800 people ran the race. You know, 4,900 people ran the race because 100 didn't even qualify to be on the track. They run the race. There's 100 winners, but there's a first loser, a second loser, third, and so on down the line. Everybody gets a place. But what he was doing was he was having another track meet on Sunday. Everybody gets to the podium on Saturday and they get their medals and they get admitted to the engineering program, or whichever school it is. I'm not picking on them. But on Sunday he would hold another track meet, and he would only invite some of the kids. And actually they don't race. He just hands out the medal. You know, because he created 25 more spots in the class. There weren't 100 spots, but there were 125. Well, guess what? The first 25 losers deserved those spots. They earned them on Saturday. But he gave them away to kids that didn't earn them the next day. And that's what was going on.
Well, what I think the issue might be, I'd like to get your opinion on this. The admissions committee is going to have criteria, and they're going to determine, you know, who should be brought in. The question is, does the president have the wisdom and the authority to make some exceptions